Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. This is Joe, the bearded historian. He'll tell you an interesting story. Be careful of his soldiers, they can be brats. This is Angel, she's an entity. She'll cause chaos and plant her hands at you. This is Sue, she likes spirits, not the alcohol. She's the reason this channel exists. This is David, he likes fire trucks. He's here occasionally. Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. We preserve his story.
Okay. It says Karen Leonard, I think. And then it says paint, bracelets. I'm also a special needs person. She does lots of lives. A diamond painting. I got a doggo. And quilting. So check her out and enjoy the video. Hopefully you'll learn something. Bye. Morning. Today Joe's going to talk about a famous person. I'm sure you've all heard of him. He did stuff and he was smart. And so, in that case, for that reason, I've chosen robots for a race today. Are you ready? Here we go. Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I support you. This shout out is for our friend. Ready? Here we go. Let's see who it is. Start. Put this down here. Okay, we've got She Stole, Cruising Nuts, Traveling, Amanda, Praying, Goat, Southern, Cruising is Fun, Nikki and Happy, My Linda, Alice, Reef, Marketplace, Ogden, Treasure, Freckled, Carnival, Goat, Just Doing, TNT, Bully, Lower, Tay Eats, Frugal, Swoop, Cherry, let's see who else talks, Spectral, Martin, there's Carrie, Super Casual Federalistic, Pepperos, let's see, looks like it's going to be Carrie. Alright, Mr. Bud, the bearded historian's going to tell us something interesting. We'll pretend like we're paying attention.
Yeah, better put your feet up, have a cup of coffee. This might take a little bit. Today, 14th of March, 1879.
The world didn't know, just kidding.
Well, very close. A German-born theoretical physicist was born, who is widely held to believe one of the greatest and most influential scientists of all time. He was known for developing the theory of relativity. Yes, we're talking about Albert Einstein. He also made important contributions to quantum mechanics, and thus was a central figure in the revolutionary reshaping of the scientific understanding of nature that modern physics accomplished in the first decades of the 20th century. The mass equivalence, energy equivalence formula, the E equals mc squared, which arises from the relativity theory, has been called the world's most famous equation. He received the 1921 Nobel Prize for Physics for his services to theoretical physics, and especially for his discovery of the law of the photoelectric effect, a pivotal step in the development of quantum theory. His work was also known for its influence on the philosophy of science, and in a 1999 poll of 130 leading physicists worldwide in the British journal Physics World, Einstein was ranked the greatest physicist of all time.
Woo!
Yeah, go right to the head of the class. His intellectual achievements and originality have made the word Einstein broadly synonymous with genius. Now, let's turn back the clock just a touch.
Just a touch?
Things known for general relativity, special relativity, photoelectric effect, the E equals hf Planck-Einstein relation, the theory of Brownian motion, Einstein field equations, Bose-Einstein statistics, Bose-Einstein condensate, gravitational waves. I mean, yeah, the guy's a genius, pretty much, straight out. Now, going all the way back into history, he was born in the German Empire, Einstein moved to Switzerland in 1895, forsaking his German citizenship as a subject of the Kingdom of Württemberg. The following year, in 1897, at the age of 17, he enrolled in the Mathematics and Physics Teaching Diploma program at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, graduating in 1900. In 1901, he acquired Swiss citizenship, which he kept for the rest of his life. In 1903, he secured a permanent position at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. In 1905, he submitted a successful PhD dissertation to the University of Zurich. And in 1914, he moved to Berlin in order to join the Prussian Academy of Sciences and the Humboldt University of Berlin. Can't have too many, schools to work with. In 1917, he became director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics. He also became a German citizen again, this time as a subject of the Kingdom of Prussia. Well, in 1933, while he was visiting the United States, Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany. Horrified by the Nazi war of extermination against his fellow Jews, Einstein decided to remain in the U.S. and was granted American citizenship in 1940. On the eve of World War II, he endorsed a letter to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt alerting him to the potential of a German nuclear weapons program and recommended that the U.S. begin similar research. Einstein supported the Allies, but generally viewed the idea of nuclear weapons with great dismay.
Why?
I don't know, something about us blowing ourselves up. In 1905, sometimes described his Annus Mirabilis, or miracle year, Einstein published 4 groundbreaking papers. Can't have just one. These outlined a theory of the photoelectric effect, explained the Brownian motion, introduced his special theory of relativity, a theory which addressed the inability of classical mechanics to account satisfactorily for the behavior of the electromagnetic field, and demonstrated that if the special theory is correct, mass and energy are equivalent to each other. In 1915, he proposed a general theory of relativity that extended his system of mechanics to incorporate gravitation. A cosmological paper that he published the following year laid out the implications of general relativity for the modeling of the structure and evolution of the universe as a whole. This guy was just sitting around coming up with stuff.
Yeah, makes me feel stupid.
Make everybody just get out of the class. You're causing even the teacher to get the shakes. The middle part of his career also saw him making important contributions to statistical mechanics and quantum theory. Especially notable was his work on the quantum physics of radiation, in which light consists of particles, subsequently called photons. For much of the last phase of his academic life, Einstein worked on his 2 endeavors that proved ultimately unsuccessful. Firstly, he advocated against quantum theory's introduction of the fundamental randomness into science's picture of the world, objecting that God does not play dice.
Doesn't?
Apparently.
Damn it.
Secondly, he attempted to devise a unified field theory by generalizing his geometric theory of gravitation to include electromagnetism, too. As a result, he became increasingly isolated from the mainstream of modern physics. Kind of like, well, if you're not going to believe me, we're just going to turn the page. Now, Albert Einstein, I love how this, information, they like to keep throwing things all the way back to the beginning, was born in Ulm, in the Kingdom of Württemberg, on the 14th of March in 1879. His parents, a secular Ashkenazi Jew, was Hermann Einstein, a salesman and engineer, and Pauline Koch. In 1880, the family moved to Munich's borough of Ludwigslornstadt, or Ivesorstadt, where Einstein's father and his uncle Jacob founded Elektrotechnik Shop Fabrik J. Einstein CIE, a company that manufactured electrical equipment based on direct current, DC. Now, Albert attended a Catholic elementary school in Munich from the age of 5, and when he was 8, he was transferred to the Luitpold Gymnasium, now known as the Albert Einstein Gymnasium, where he received an advanced primary and then secondary school education. Well, in 1894, Hermann and Jacob's company tendered for a contract to install electrical lighting in Munich, but without success. They lacked the capital that would have been required to update their technology from direct current to the more efficient alternating current alternative. The failure of this bid forced them to sell the Munich factory and search for new opportunities elsewhere. The Einstein family first moved to Italy, in Milan, and then a few months later to Pavia, where they settled in Palazzo Corzani. Einstein, then 15, wanted to stay behind in Munich in order to finish his schooling. His father wanted him to study electrical engineering, but he was a fractious pupil who found the gymnasium's regimen and teaching methods far from congenial. He later wrote that the school's policy of strict rote learning was harmful to creativity. At the end of 1894, a letter from the doctor persuaded the Luitpold's authorities to release him from its care, and he joined the family in Pavia. While Italy, as a teenager, he wrote an essay on the investigation of the state of the ether in a magnetic field. Now, let's go ahead and have some fun with that sentence. They liked strictly rote learning, and they wanted to basically remove the idea of creativity. Could you imagine what the universe would be like if they ran it out of him?
Yeah.
I mean, let's destroy creativity. That's one of the worst things you can do to somebody. Well, Einstein excelled at physics and mathematics at an early age, soon acquired the mathematical expertise only found in a child several years his senior. He began teaching himself algebra, calculus, Euclidean geometry. I'm like, what? Wait a second.
Can't even teach myself simple things like complicated things.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we were fighting with trigonometry in college, and one problem would take 8 pages. One problem. He's teaching himself this stuff.
I never got past basic math. I think I got into algebra 1.
Yeah. Well, when he was 12, he made such rapid progress on the discovery of the original proof of the Pythagorean theorem before his 13th birthday. The family tutor, Max Talmud, said that only a short time after he was given the 12-year-old Einstein a geometry textbook, the boy had worked through the whole book.
Damn it.
He therefore developed himself to a higher mathematics. Soon the flight of his mathematical genius was so high I couldn't follow. Einstein recorded that he had mastered integral and differential calculus when he was only 14. His love of algebra and geometry was so great that by 12 he is already confident that nature could be understood as a mathematical structure. This is when somebody says, this kid could cause something really bad, like a bomb or something.
Show off.
Well, at 13, when his range of enthusiasms had broadened to include music and philosophy, Einstein was introduced to Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. Kant became his favorite philosopher, according to the tutor. At a time he was still a child, only 13 years old, yet Kant's works, incomprehensible to normal mortals, seemed to be clear to him. Okay, class. Well, in 1895, at the age of 16, Einstein sat the entrance examination for the Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, Switzerland. He failed to reach the required standard in the general part of the test, but performed with distinction in the physics and mathematics, which meant, what's the small stuff here?
Mm-hmm.
On the advice of the Polytechnic's principal, he completed his secondary education at the Argovian Cantonal School Gymnasium in Aarau, Switzerland, graduating in 1896. While lodging in Aarau with the family of Jost Wintler, he fell in love with Wintler's daughter, Marie. His sister Maja later married Wintler's son, Paul. In January of 1896, with the father's approval, Einstein renounced his citizenship of the German kingdom of Württemberg in order to avoid conscription in the military service. Good call. The Maratara graduation for the successful completion of a higher secondary schooling awarded to him in September of that year acknowledged him to have performed well across most of the curriculum, allotting him a top grade of 6 for his history, physics, algebra, geometry, and descriptive geometry. At 17, he enrolled in the 4-year mathematics and physics teaching diploma program at the Federal Polytechnic School. Marie Whittler, a year older than him, took up a teaching post at Olsberg, Switzerland. The 5 other Polytechnic School freshmen following the same course as Einstein included just one woman, a 20-year-old Serbian, Milica Maric. Over the next few years, the pair spent many hours discussing their shared interests and learning about the topic of physics that the Polytechnic School's lectures did not cover. In his letters to Maric, Einstein confessed that exploring science with her by his side was much more enjoyable than reading a textbook in solitude. Eventually, the two students became not only friends, but also lovers. Now, historians of physics are divided on the question of what extent that Maric contributed to the insights of Einstein's on his marvelous publications. There is at least some evidence that he was influenced by her scientific ideas, but there are scholars who doubt whether her impact on his thought was of any great significance at all. Great little debate there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, correspondence between Einstein and Maric, discovered and published in 1987, revealed that in early 1902, while Maric was visiting her grandparents in Novi Sad, she gave birth to a daughter, Lizeri. When Maric returned to Switzerland, it was without the child, whose fate is uncertain.
Oh dear.
A letter to Einstein that he wrote in September 1903 suggested the girl was either given up for adoption or died of scarlet fever in infancy.
Oh.
Sucky. Well, Einstein and Maric married in January 1903. In May of 1904, their son Hans Albert was born in Bern, Switzerland. Their son Eduard was born in Zurich in 1910. In letters that Einstein wrote to Marie Whittler in the months before Eduard's arrival, he described that his love for his wife was as misguided and mourned the missed life that he imagined he would have enjoyed had he married Whittler instead. I think of you in heartfelt love every spare minute, and I am so unhappy as only a man can be. In 1912, Einstein entered into a relationship with Elsa Lowenthal, who was both his first cousin on mother's side and second cousin on his father's side. Wow.
Well, then, that's a tree that doesn't branch out very much.
No. When Maric learned of his infidelity soon after moving to Berlin with him in 1914, she returned to Zurich, taking Hans Albert and Eduard with her. Einstein and Maric were granted a divorce on the 14th of February in 1919.
Oh, happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Ouch. On the grounds of having lived apart for 5 years. As part of the divorce settlement, Einstein agreed if he was to win a Nobel Prize, he would give the money that he received to Maric. He won the prize 2 years later.
Yeah.
Einstein married Lowenthal in 1919. In 1923, they began a relationship. He began a relationship with the secretary named Betty Newman. The niece of the close.
He
goes around, yeah. He was a smart guy and dumb with women, apparently.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, the niece was of his close friend Hans Muisham. Lowenthal nevertheless remained loyal to him, accompanying him when he immigrated to the United States in 1933. In 1935, she was diagnosed with heart and kidney problems, died in 1936. Well, a volume of Einstein's letters released in Hebrew University of Jerusalem in 2006 added further names to the catalog of women whom he had been romantically involved.
Definitely becoming a catalog.
Yeah, they included Margaret Liebach, a married Austrian, Estella Kassenbogen, a rich owner of a florist business, Toni Mendel, a wealthy Jewish widow, and Ethel Mischkowski, a Berlin socialite, with whom he had spent time and whom he accepted gifts when married to Lowenthal. After being widowed, Einstein was briefly in a relationship with Margarita Kornikova, although thought by some to be a Russian spy. Her husband, the Russian sculptor Sergei Kodakov, created a bronze bust of Einstein at the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton.
That seems weird.
Yeah. Following an episode of acute mental illness at about the age of 20, Einstein's son Eduard was diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Well,
He spent the remainder of his life in the care of his mother or in temporary confinement in an asylum. After her death, he committed permanently to Bergolzi, the psychiatric university hospital in Zurich.
It happens when you don't branch out very much.
No. Einstein graduated from the Federal Polytechnic School in 1900, again duly certified as competent to teach mathematics and physics, just nothing in marriage. His successful acquisition of Swiss citizenship in 1901 was not followed by the usual sequel to conscription. The Swiss authorities deemed him medically unfit for military service. He found that Swiss schools appeared to have no use for him, failing to offer him a teaching position, despite the almost 2 years that he spent applying for one. Eventually, it was with the help of Marcel Grossmann's father that he secured a post at Bern as a Swiss Patent Office official, as a Level 3 assistant examiner. Well, patent applications that landed on Einstein's desk for his evaluation included ideas as a gravel sorter and an electric typewriter. His employers were pleased enough with his work to make his position permanent in 1903, although they did not think that he should be promoted until he fully mastered machine technology. It is conceivable that his labors at the Patent Office had a bearing on the development of special theory of relativity. He arrived at his revolutionary ideas about space, time, and light through thought experiments about the transmission of signals and the synchronization of clocks, matters which also figured in some of the inventions submitted to him for assessment. In 1902, Einstein and some of his friends he met in Bern formed a group that held regular meetings to discuss science and philosophy. Their choice of a name for their club, the Olympia Academy, was an ironic comment upon its far from Olympian status. Sometimes they were joined by Merrick, who limited her participation in their workings to careful listening. Their thinkers among their group they reflected upon were Henry Poincaré, Ernst Mach, and David Hume, all who had significantly influenced Einstein's own subsequent ideas and beliefs. Well, Einstein's first paper, Conclusions Drawn from the Phenomena of Capillary, in which he proposed a model of intermolecular attraction and which afterwards disavowed as worthless, was published in the journal Annalen der Physik in 1900. By his 24-page doctoral dissertation, also addressed a topic in molecular physics titled A New Determination of Molecular Dimensions, and dedicated to his friend Marcel Grossmann. It was completed on the 30th of April in 1905. It was proved by Professor Alfred Kleiner of the University of Zurich 3 months later. Einstein was formally awarded his Ph.D. on the 15th of January 1906. 4 other pieces of that work completed made up his famous papers on the photoelectric effect, Brownian motion, his special theory on relativity, and the equivalence of mass and energy. Had led to the years being celebrated as the Annus Mirabilis for physics, almost as wonderful as 1666, the year in which Isaac Newton experienced his greatest epiphanies. The publications deeply impressed Einstein's contemporaries. It's like, there's a kid over here who's showing off. Einstein's sabbatical as a civil servant approached his end in 1908, and he secured a junior teaching position at the University of Bern. In 1909, a lecture on relativistic electrodynamics that gave the University of Zurich, much admired by Alfred Kleiner, led to Zurich's luring him away from Bern with a newly created associate professorship. Hey, kid. Promotion to the full professional professorship followed in 1911 when he was accepted as chair at the German Charles Ferdinand University in Prague, a move that required him to become an Austrian citizen of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. His time at Prague saw him producing 11 research papers. Now, in July of 1912, he returned to his alma mater, the Zurich, to take up a chair in theoretical physics. His teaching activities there centered on thermodynamics and analytical mechanics, and his research interests included the molecular theory of heat, continuum mechanics, and the development of a relativistic theory of gravitation. In his work on the latter topic, he was assisted by his friend Marcel Grossmann, whose knowledge of that kind of mathematics required was greater than his own. In the spring of 1913, 2 German visitors, Max Planck and Walter Nersness, called upon Einstein in Zurich in the hope of persuading him to relocate to Berlin. They offered him membership in the Prussian Academy of Sciences, the directorship that the planned Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Physics and a chair at the Humboldt University in Berlin that would allow him to pursue his research supported by a professional salary, but with no teaching duties to burden him. The invitation was all more appealing because Berlin happened to be the home of his latest girlfriend, Elsa Lowenthal. He duly joined the academy on the 24th of July, 1913, moved to an apartment in Berlin district, Dahlheim, on the 1st of April, 1914, April Fool's Day. He was installed in the Humboldt University position shortly thereafter. Well, the outbreak of World War I in July of 1914 marked the beginning of Einstein's gradual estrangement from the nation of his birth. With the Manifesto of the 93 was published in October of 1914, a document signed by a host of prominent German thinkers that justified Germany's belligerence. Einstein was one of the few German intellectuals to distance himself and sign the alternative, erratic, Manifesto of the Europeans instead. But this expression of his doubts from German policy did not prevent him from being elected to a 2-year term as president of the German Physical Society in 1916. And when the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Physics opened its doors the following year, the foundation delayed because of the war. Einstein was appointed as first director, just as Planck and Nurse had promised. Einstein was elected as the foreign minister of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1920, and as a foreign minister of the Royal Society in 1921. In 1922, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1921 for his services in theoretical physics, and especially for the discovery of the law of photoelectric effect. At this point, some physicists still regarded the general theory of relativity skeptically, and the Nobel citation displayed a degree of doubt even about the work on photoelectricity that it had acknowledged. It did not assent to Einstein's notion that the particulate nature of light, which only won over the entire scientific community when S. N. Bose delivered the Planck spectrum in 1924. The same year, Einstein was elected as an international honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Britain's closest equivalent to the Nobel Award, the Royal Society's Copley Medal, was not hung around Einstein's neck until 1925. He was elected an international member of the American Philosophical Society in 1930. Well, Einstein would retire from the Prussian Academy in March of 1933. His accomplishments in Berlin had included the completion of the general theory of relativity, proving the Einstein-de Haas effect, contributing to the quantum theory of radiation, and the development of Bose-Einstein statistics. Well, in 1907, Einstein had reached a milestone in his long journey from the special theory of relativity to a new idea of gravitation with the formulation of his equivalence principle, which asserts that an observer to an infinitesimally small box falling freely in a gravitational field would be unable to find any evidence that the field exists. In 1911, he used the principle to estimate that the amount of which a ray of light from a distant star would be bent by the gravitational pull of the sun as it passed close to the sun's photosphere, that is, the sun's apparent surface. He reworked this calculation in 1913, having now found a way to model gravitation with a Riemann curvature tensor of a non-Euclidean four-dimensional spacetime. By the fall of 1913, his reimagining of the mathematics of gravitation in the terms of Riemann geometry was complete, and he applied the new theory not just to the behavior of the sun as a gravitational lens, but also to another astronomical phenomenon, the precession of the perihelion of Mercury, a slow drift at the point of Mercury's elliptical orbit at which it approaches the sun most closely. A total eclipse of the sun that took place in 1919 in May provided an opportunity to put his theory of gravitational lensing to the test, and observations performed by Sir Arthur Eddington yielded results that were consistent with his calculations. Eddington's work was reported in length in newspapers around the world, and on the 7th of November 1919, for example, the leading British newspaper, The Times, published a banner headline that read, "Revolution in Science, New Theory of the Universe, Newtonians' Ideas Overthrown." Well, with Eddington's eclipse observations widely reported, not just in academic journals, but in the popular press as well, Einstein became possibly the world's first celebrity scientist, a genius who had shattered the paradigm of basic physics understanding to the universe since the 17th century. Einstein had begun his new life as an intellectual icon in America, where he arrived in 1921. He was welcomed in New York by Mayor John Francis Hyland and spent 3 weeks giving lectures and attending receptions. He spoke several times at Columbia University and Princeton, and in Washington he visited the White House with representatives of the National Academy of Sciences. He returned to Europe via London, where he was the guest of philosopher and statesman Viscount Haldane. He used his time in the British capital to meet several people prominent in the British scientific, political, or intellectual field, and delivered a lecture at King's College. In July of 1921, he published an essay, My First Impression of the USA, in which he sought to sketch the American character, much as Alex de Tocqueville in Democracy in America in 1835. He wrote his transatlantic host of highly approving terms. What strikes a visitor is the joyous, positive attitude to life. The American is friendly, self-confident, optimistic, and without envy. In 1922, Einstein's travels were to the Old World rather than the New. He devoted 6 months to a tour of Asia, which saw him speaking in Japan, Singapore, and Sri Lanka, later known as, at that time, as Ceylon. And after his first public lecture in Tokyo, he met Emperor Yoshihito and his wife at the Imperial Palace, with thousands of spectators thronging the streets in the hope of catching a glimpse of him. In his letter to his sons, he wrote that the Japanese people seemed to him to be generally modest, intelligent, considerate, and to have a true appreciation of art. But his picture of them in his diary was less flattering. The intellectual needs of the nation seemed to be weaker than their artistic ones. Natural disposition? ? His journal also contains views of China and Indian people, which were uncomplimentary. Of the Chinese people, he wrote that even the children were spiritless and look obtuse. It would be a pity if these Chinese supplant all other races. For the likes of us, the mere thought is unspeakably dreary. He was greeted with even greater enthusiasm in his last leg of his tour, in which he spent 12 days in Mandatory Palestine, newly entrusted to the British rule by the League of Nations in the aftermath of World War I. Sir Herbert Samuel, the British High Commissioner, welcomed with a degree of ceremony.
Oops.
Bearded historian sneezing. Normally accustomed, according to a visiting head of state, including a cannon salute. One reception held in his honor was stormed by people that wanted to hear him speak. He told them he was happy the Jews were beginning to be recognized as a force in the world. Einstein's decision to tour the Eastern Hemisphere in 1922 meant that he was unable to go to Stockholm in December of that year to participate in the Nobel Prize ceremony. His place at the traditional Nobel banquet was taken by a German diplomat who gave a speech praising him not only as a physicist, but also as a campaigner for peace. A 2-week visit to Spain that he undertook in 1923 saw him collecting another award, membership in the Spanish Academy of Sciences, signified by a diploma handed to him by King Alfonso XIII. His Spanish trip also saw him get a chance to meet another fellow Nobel laureate, the anatomist Santiago Rabón de Cajal. Now, from 1922 to 1932, with the exception of a few months in 1923 and 24, Einstein was a member of the Geneva-based International Committee on Intellectual Cooperation in the League of Nations, a group set up by the League to encourage scientists, artists, scholars, teachers, and other people engaged in the life of the mind to work more closely with their counterparts in other countries. He was appointed the German delegate rather than as a representative of Switzerland because of the machiaves of two Catholic activists, Oscar Hlacki and Gaspé Moda. By persuading Secretary General Eric Dumond to deny Einstein the place of the committee reserved for the Swiss thinker, they created an opening for Gonzgue de Reynaud, who used the League of Nations position as a platform for which to promote traditional Catholic doctrine. Einstein's former physics professor, Hendrik Lorentz, and Polish chemist Marie Curie were also members of this committee. We talked about Curie earlier.
Yes, we did.
Well, in March and April of 1925, Einstein and his wife visited South America, where they spent about a week in Brazil, a week in Uruguay, and a month in Argentina. Their tour was suggested by George Duclaut and Marcio Nierenstein, with the support of several Argentine scholars, including Julio Rey Pastor, Jacob Laub, and Leopold Lugones, and was financed primarily by the Council of University of Buenos Aires and the Association Hebraica Argentina, with a smaller contribution from the Argentine Germanic Cultural Institution. Well, in December of 1930, Einstein began another significant sojourn to the United States, drawn back to the U.S. by the offer of a 2-month research fellowship at the California Institute of Technology. Caltech supported him in its wish he should not be exposed to quite as much attention from the media as he had experienced when he visited in 1921, and therefore declined all invitation to receive prizes or make speeches that his admirers poured down upon him. But he remained willing to allow his fans at least some time with him if they requested. Upon arriving in New York City, Einstein was taken to various places and events, including Chinatown, lunch with the editors of the New York Times, and a performance of Carmen at the Metropolitan Opera, where he was cheered by the audiences on his arrival. During the days following, he was given keys to the city by Mayor Jimmy Walker and met Nicholas Murray Butler, the president of the Columbia University, who described Einstein as the ruling monarch of the mind. Nice title. Harry Emerson Fosdick, pastor of the New York's Riverside Church, gave Einstein a tour of the church and showed him a full-size statue of the church made of Einstein standing at the entrance. Also, during his stay in New York, a crowd of 15,000 people at Madison Square Garden joined during a Hanukkah celebration. Now, Einstein next traveled to California, where he met the Caltech president and Nobel laureate Robert A. Millikan. His friendship with Millikan was awkward, as Millikan had a penchant for patriotic militarism, and Einstein was a pronounced pacifist. During the address to Caltech students, Einstein noted that the science was often inclined to do more harm than good. The aversion to war also led Einstein to befriend authors Upton Sinclair and film star Charlie Chaplin, both noted for their pacifism. Carl Lemire, head of the Universal Studios, gave Einstein a tour of the studio and introduced him to Chaplin. They had an instant rapport, and Chaplin inviting Einstein and his wife, Elsa, to his home for dinner. Chaplin and Einstein's outward persona, calm and gentle, seemed to conceal highly emotional temperament from which came his extraordinarily intellectual energy. Chaplin's film, City Lights, was to premiere a few days later in Hollywood, and Chaplin invited Einstein and Elsa to join him as special guests. Walter Isaacson, Einstein's biographer, described this as one of the most memorable scenes in the new era of celebrity. Chaplin visited Einstein at his home in a later trip to Berlin and recalled the modest little flat and the piano, which he had begun writing his theory. Chaplin speculated that it was possibly used as kindling wood by the Nazis.
Well then.
Well, in 1933, while on a visit to the United States, Einstein knew that he would be unable to return to Germany with the rise of power of the Nazis under Germany's new Chancellor, Adolf Hitler. While the American universities in 1933, he undertook his third 2-month visiting professorship at the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena. In February and March of 1933, the Gestapo repeatedly raided his family's apartment in Berlin. He and his wife returned to Europe in March, and during that trip they learned that the German Reichstag had passed the Enabling Act, transforming Hitler's government into a de facto legal dictatorship, and that he would not be able to proceed to Berlin. Later on, they had learned that their cottage had been raided by the Nazis and Einstein's personal sailboat confiscated. Upon landing in Antwerp, Belgium, on the 28th of March, Einstein immediately went to the German consulate and surrendered his passport, formally renouncing his German citizenship. The Nazis later sold his boat and converted his cottage into a Hitler youth camp.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, charming people. In April of 1933, Einstein discovered the new German government had passed laws barring Jews from holding official positions, including teaching at universities. Historian Gerald Holton describes how, with virtually no audible protest being raised by their colleagues, thousands of Jewish scientists were suddenly forced to give up their university positions, and their names were removed from the rolls of institutions where they were employed. It's like we're going to erase history. Kind of sounds like what goes on lately. A month later, Einstein's works were among those targeted by German Student Union and the Nazi book burnings, with Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels proclaiming Jewish intellectualism is dead. One German magazine included a list of enemies of their German regime with the phrase "not yet hanged," offering a $5,000 bounty on his head. In a subsequent letter to his physicist and friend Max Born, who has already immigrated from Germany to England, Einstein wrote, "I must confess that the degree of brutality and cowardice came as something of a surprise." After moving to the U.S., he described the book burnings as a spontaneous emotional outburst, and those who shun popular enlightenment and, more than anything else in the world, fear the influence of men of intellectual independence. Einstein was now without a permanent home, unsure of where he would live and work, and equally worried about the fate of countless other scientists still in Germany. Aided by the Academic Assistance Council, founded in April of 1933 by British Liberal politician William Beveridge to help academics escape Nazi prosecution, Einstein was able to leave Germany. He rented a house in De Haan, Belgium, where he lived a few months. Late July of 1933, he visited England for about 6 weeks at the invitation of the British Member of Parliament, Commander Oliver Locker Lamson, who became friends with him in the preceding years. Locker Lamson invited him to stay at his Cromer home in a secluded wooden cabin in the Rothen Heath in the parish of Rothen Norfolk. To protect Einstein, Locker Lambton had 2 bodyguards watch over him. A photo of them carrying shotguns and guarding Einstein was published in the Daily Herald in 1933. Well, Locker Hampson took Einstein to meet Winston Churchill at his home, and later Austin Chamberlain and former Prime Minister Lloyd George. Einstein asked them to help Jewish scientists out of Germany. British historian Martin Gilbert notes that Churchill responded immediately and sent his friend physicist Frederick Lindemann to Germany to seek out Jewish scientists and place them on British universities. Churchill later observed that as a result, Germany, having driven the Jews out, had lowered their technical standards and put the Allies' technology ahead of theirs. Einstein would later contact leaders of other nations, including Turkey's Prime Minister Ismet Inönü, who he wrote in September, requesting placement of unemployed German Jewish scientists. As a result of Einstein's letter, Jewish invitees to Turkey eventually totaled out over 1,000 saved individuals. That's kind of cool.
That is kind of cool.
Locker and Lambton also submitted a bill to Parliament to extend British citizenship to Einstein, during which period Einstein made a number of public appearances describing the crisis brewing in Europe. In one of the speeches, he denounced Germany's treatment of the Jews, while at the same time he introduced a bill promoting Jewish citizenship in Palestine, where they're being denied citizenship elsewhere. In his speech, he described Einstein as a citizen of the world who should be offered temporary shelter in the UK. Both bills failed, however, and Einstein then accepted an earlier offer at the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, U.S., to become a resident scholar. Now, in October of 1933, Einstein delivered a speech at the importance of academic freedom before a packed house at the Royal Albert Hall in London. The Times reported he was wildly cheered throughout. 4 days later, he returned to the U.S. and took up a position at the Institute of Advanced Study. Noted for being a refugee from Nazi Germany at the time, most American universities, including Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, had minimal or no Jewish faculty or students as a result of their Jewish quotas, which lasted until the late 1940s. Einstein at that time was still undecided about his future. He had offers from several European universities, including Christchurch, Oxford, where he stayed for 3 short periods, and was offered a 5-year research fellowship called a studentship at Christchurch, But in 1935, he arrived at the decision to remain permanently at the U.S. and apply for citizenship. Now, Einstein's affiliation with the Institute for Advanced Studies would last until his death in 1955. He was one of the four first selected, along with John von Neumann, Kurt Gödel, and Hermann Weyl, at the new institute. He developed a close friendship with Gödel. The two would take long talks together discussing their work. Maria Kaufmann, his assistant, later became a physicist. During this period, Einstein tried to develop a unified field theory to refute the accepted interpretation of quantum physics, both unsuccessfully. He lived at Princeton at his home in 1935 onwards. The Albert Einstein House is now a national landmark and was made so in 1976. Now, 1939, a group of Hungarian scientists that included emigre physicist Leo Szilard attempted to alert Washington on the ongoing Nazi atomic bomb research. The group's warnings were discounted, and Einstein and Szilard, along with other refugees such as Edward Teller and Eugene Wigner, regarded as their responsibility to alert Americans to the possibility that the German scientists might win the race to build an atomic bomb. For anybody listening,
What?
go ahead and check out the movie. We just talked about it because they won 7 Oscars.
Eisenhower? Eisenhower?
Oppenheimer, yeah.
Eisenhower.
Yeah.
I know I wasn't saying it right.
Not just quite there. A lot of it, this here, talks about what both Einstein and the scientists were coming up with, because the threat was that if Hitler got a hold of the bomb first, things were not going to be good. To make certain that the U.S. was aware of the danger, in July of 1939, a few months before the beginning of the war, Szilard and Wigner visited Einstein to explain the possibility of atomic bombs, which Einstein, a pacifist, said he had never considered. When asked to lend his support by writing a letter with Szilard to President Roosevelt, recommending the U.S. pay attention and engage in its own nuclear weapons research. The letter is believed to be arguably the key stimulus for the U.S. adoption of serious investigations into nuclear weapons on the eve of the U.S. entry into World War II. In addition to the letter, Einstein used his connections with the Belgian royal family and the Belgian Queen Mother to get access to a personal envoy to the White House Oval Office. Some say that as a result of Einstein's letter and the meetings with Roosevelt, the U.S. entered the race to develop the bomb, drawing on its immense material, financial, and scientific resources to initiate the Manhattan Project. For Einstein, quote, war was a disease, and he called for resistance to war. By signing the letter to Roosevelt, some argue he went against his pacifist principles. In 1954, a year before his death, Einstein said to his old friend Linus Pauling, "I made one great mistake in my life when I signed the letter to President Roosevelt recommending that atom bombs be made, but there was some justification. The danger that the Germans would make them." In 1955, Einstein and 10 other intellectuals and scientists, including British philosopher Bertrand Russell, signed a manifesto highlighting the danger of nuclear weapons. In 1960, Einstein was included posthumously as a member of the World Academy of Arts and Science, an organization founded to distinguish scientists and intellectuals who committed themselves to the responsibility and ethical advances of science, particularly in the light of the development of nuclear weapons. But it's just kind of amazing to sit back and imagine that this guy was just, he could sit there and come up with this stuff, either from a book or it just kept churning in the background. He would talk with other, physicists and other intellectuals, and he could make heads and tails of it. I guess the other thing that was kind of funny is, I guess after he died, again, here was a guy who had an IQ that was just off the scales. They said, actually, interestingly enough, Einstein's brain was smaller. But it was so packed with all that knowledge that it was just kind of an amazing thing. But again, he passed away in 1955, but we want to say happy birthday to the genius, Albert Einstein.
I wish that we had a brain.
Yeah, with that much thinking ability. But this has been the Bearded Historian. You folks have a good week, and we'll see you next week. Class dismissed.
Ooh, that's not what I meant to do.